Hello, everybody. Welcome to Toki TV. Thank you for watching. Good morning, good evening, good afternoon, wherever you're watching from. As you know, or if you don't know, we are here gathering each and every week for Sk'aliChelh-tenaut, and we gather in faith, prayer, and education. And this week we have a super special guest with us today, Dr. Stephanie Norman, who we're going to hear from in just a little bit. Before we get started, because that's just going to take up so much of the. It's so exciting. The whole show is going to be really really great. But to get us grounded, because I need to get grounded, Roberto is going to open us up in prayer today.
Good evening from Florida. Thank you so much for the opportunity again. And this is the mantra that I been praying for Toki since May of 2021. And I'll just do it for, let's say, half a minute or so. And the mantra is Nam-myoho Renge-kyo, which means that I make a connection. I fuse my life with the universal law of cause and effect. And the point is to elevate our state of consciousness to one where we grow to appreciate life with dignity. And I'm going to start with Nam-myoho Renge-kyo. Nam-myoho Renge-kyo, 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 Nam-myoho Renge-kyo. Nam-myoho Renge-kyo, 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 Nam-myoho Renge-kyo. Nam-myoho Renge-kyo, 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 Nam-myoho Renge-kyo. Nam-myoho Renge-kyo, Nam-myoho Renge-kyo, Nam-myoho Renge-kyo. Nam-myoho Renge-kyo, Nam-myoho Renge-kyo, Nam-myoho Renge-kyo. Thank you.
Thank you, Roberto, very, very much for that. For those that don't know, Roberto is at the Sea Aquarium each and every week in silent prayer and does this during the weekend, during the day hours, at night, at sunrise, just making sure Toki knows she is not alone. And thank you, Roberto, for doing that for us each and every week. Real quick, Howard, I want to check in with you. How are you?
Doing well, thanks. We're up on the banks of the Elwha River at the Big Salmon Ranch. Ken and Susan and the group have gone down to the river for right now. I'll go later today or tomorrow and tomorrow. But it's just been beautiful here. Absolutely fantastic. Yesterday we had a herd of about 75 elk that came onto the property, onto the pastures, and were grazing and lounging and having a wonderful time. But there are different paddocks, different sort of, big pens where, for the horses. This was once a horse ranch. And a lot of the young ones were trapped into one of the pens. It's a paddock, basically. It's a big field because they came in a gate that then blew shut. And so the adults had no problem. They can just, hop right over the fence. But there were about 20 yearlings, little ones, and they couldn't get over. And so they were running back and forth, and all of the adults had left but one mom, one cow, one of the mothers, and she stayed with them, but she was with them running up and down trying to find an opening. And so eventually, Ken and I were able to get in close, open up the gate and tie it open and get out of the way. But while they were running up and down, this was our big adventure yesterday. I had to share it because this was so dramatic and so exciting. And there were, in the rest of the herd, were about a dozen bull elks with the big racks, the big regal racks, and they were bugling really loudly. There was a lot of distress between them to save those little ones and get them out of there. So they were all, I'm sure, very relieved when they could finally go out that open gate and rejoin the family. Before, we were afraid that they would panic so much that they would just run right into the fences and get tangled or injured, and we didn't want that. So that was our big adventure yesterday. Today, not so much. We just kind of relaxed. But anyway, it's a beautiful place, and they're down at a stretch of the river that is between where the dams were at one time. And, they were taken out, I think it's about 6 or 7 years ago that first one, then the other dam was finally removed so that the salmon could get up the river. And they are. They're recolonizing. They're laying their eggs in that stretch. That is the most productive stretch of river is right down there where they are right now. So it's rebuilding the salmon populations, and that's a beautiful thing to see. So that's where I am and what we're doing. Thanks for asking.
That sounds exciting. Saving animals, watching the salmon. It's awesome.
Yeah.
Awesome. Alejandro, how's it going there in Miami?
Doing well, thanks. Thank you, Howard. You are a hero for doing that. Thank you so much.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Great. It was fun. It was great.
Like I say, every time, just encouraging everyone to keep praying for Lolita, for Toki time, sending her good vibes, positive energy. And I want to give a special thanks to Dr. Stephanie Norman for joining us today, for taking care of Toki Lolita Sk'aliChelh-tenaut. And I want to thank you a lot from the bottom of my heart to the moon. Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Thank
you.
Oh,
and I'd like to apologize for the whining dog because she's missing Susan. And I'm trying to give her as many treats as I can, but they only work for so long, and then she starts missing Susan again. So if I suddenly say sit, it's because I'm giving a treat to our dog, who's right here. Oh, poor puppy.
Hey. I think you're muted still, Annette.
And I'm sitting here talking away, and I'm the one that's muted. Okay, I was trying to mute Howard's dog, and then I muted myself. Sorry about that. Thank you.
No worries.
Dr. Norman, thank you so much for being with us today. Dr. Stephanie Norman is a veterinary epidemiologist and wildlife veterinarian who has been involved in the field of animal health, disease, and conservation for the past 20 years. And all of you watching know her as Toki's vet. So before we get to know a little bit more about you, Dr. Norman, because I've been impressed just reading up on you and your experience. Is there anything that you want to share with the people watching today regarding Toki?
Sure. So just a little bit of, most people, of course, are familiar with her story. So just a little bit about where myself and Dr. Jim McBain, who is a retired marine mammal veterinarian, he was at SeaWorld for many years and now lives on Lopez Island. But, we came in pretty recently in this whole story of Toki, and as part of an effort to provide an independent, sort of a third-party set of eyes in the health sector, health part of her care, and not so much to be, to say, hey, you're doing this right, or you need to do this, but to act as a collaborative team with her present veterinarians at the Aquaria, and also as some other consulting vets that do work with the veterinarians there at the Miami Seaquarium. So we were initially brought in, Jim and I were, with Friends of Lolita, an organization that was a nonprofit started or co-founded by Pritam Singh in Florida, and he works with Charles Vinnick. But essentially what Friends of Lolita wanted to do was to bring in a collaborative team working with the dolphin company that owns the aquarium now, and the Miami-Dade County administrators, and other experts in this area, to try to come up with a comprehensive team that works together and it's trying to provide the best care for her, and particularly in light of recent reports last summer with the USDA. So we were brought in May, and our first visit was out in May, beginning of May, to take a look at her. And so we were just very, just observing the area. We looked at her facility, we looked at her pool, we talked to the trainers that were there. We talked to her veterinarian, sat down and spent about 3 days there going over her blood work, going over her behaviors, going over just her what's a day in life of Toki. We were able to go, Jim and I went by ourselves to the pool just to sit and observe her without the influence of any of her trainers around. So we got some time to spend with her. And I not knowing her history as far as seeing her, it was the first time I had seen her. And I was actually quite impressed, at least with her level of enthusiasm, her level of curiosity, having seen people that she's never seen before. So, I didn't know what to expect. So she was definitely pretty active. She listened, when we got everybody together, we're talking to the caregivers, her husbandry staff. We look at, the pools, we're talking, and she was almost like she was listening to us. She sat right by the wall, like you go up the ramp, and then we are there, and she's right there listening. She was kind of listening to our conversation. And so I kind of walked around, looked at, just the pool itself and from all angles, and she followed me around, and we just kind of stared at each other for a little while. And, I said, hey, I'm from your backyard. So I just, your pod says hi, just, between the two of us. And so it was a nice, it was very encouraging because I was, her teeth were in good shape. I was not expecting, I didn't know what to expect. So I thought, well, maybe she might not, after 50 years in captivity. So I was really surprised. I was happy to see that. So we learned the types of medications she's been on. We reviewed her records. We talked about some of the things that, would need to change in her environment while a decision is being made. Because as far as Jim and I know, we do not know at this point what the dolphin company wants to do with her. They have not provide the information to anybody outside their organization. So we don't know at all what their plan is. So what we're doing in the meantime, in the interim, is taking care of her, providing her with her, suggestions. If we, like, for an example, she was on an IV antibiotic, and, IV antibiotics are not bad in of themselves, but for long term, they're not the most pleasant way to receive medication. And so we didn't want to have that be her long-term care until, there's indication in her blood work that she can go off. So part of the problem is trying to find an antibiotic that's oral, that's well tolerated, an animal that size, that will kill bugs. If we come across any bugs, it needs to be able to kill multiple bugs. Because many bugs these days, when I say bugs, I mean pathogens such as, bacteria, and, everybody gets infections or, gets exposure to to pathogens. And especially when you're an older individual, whether you're human or a whale, our immune systems don't work as well. So we just want to make sure that she's on the best medications. And those are sometimes difficult to track down because, you have to have a large volume. She's a large animal. So so part of what our job is, Jim and I, as these third party consulting or third party healthcare advisors, is that we are providing monthly updates. Sometimes there's not a whole lot of news to report. Like, yeah, we changed our antibiotic, or we did blood work, and so far nothing's changed, or she's eating well, or she's, and so one thing that we did notice, and I think it'll be in the upcoming report here in the next day, is that they did change antibiotics. One of them was an IV antibiotic, just because we don't want to risk her someday not feeling well and then not presenting her flukes. So because this has to be entirely voluntary on her part. So what we decided is to try to find an oral antibiotic to substitute for that one. But we first tried to take her off of it, and, she did, she wasn't as active as she normally is. So they put her back on the IV antibiotic until we found an oral antibiotic, and now she's holding steady and doing well. So part of the problem in a whale that large, which I think has always been a problem for any park that has an animal that large, is trying to use diagnostics that we would use in a smaller species, such as a bottlenose dolphin or a porpoise, because an animal that large, you can't always do ultrasounds, you can't always do x-rays. They're just too large. There's nothing that penetrates that deep into the animal. And so we have to end up we have to kind of look to other technologies, such as, blow cultures, or maybe, doing some more genetic type pathogen detection. And so those are some of the things that we'll have to look into in the future to see if we can find other methods to really hone in on more exact, to really be able to monitor health more closely. And so these monthly updates just update the public and people interested. Here's what we've done this month. Here's what we've done this month. And here's, and sometimes it doesn't change much. It's just, keeping her steady on what she is right now. So it's just monitoring her appetite, what's her behavior like. So those all go into consideration when we do the report, because those types of, those things that we look at her for, like her behavior and her interaction with her handlers and her trainers, those are really important because they can indicate some type of health problem. So we do rely on that staff, those folks quite often, pretty regularly, to be able to get a feel of what her overall health condition is. Because, we can do blood work, but like I said, we can't do ultrasounds very easily. We can do partly, but we have to really get her trained to handle those types of diagnostics. So those are things that are being worked on. Water quality, water comes in from the Biscayne Bay area. So that's something that is being looked at because, especially, I had to bring up climate change, but it's really difficult to cool down water temperature that comes in from a really warm body of water like Biscayne Bay. So we have to make sure that those systems are working well, make sure that the water quality is good in the sense of not having, that's clean properly. So those are all things, it's an aging facility. And so those are things that have to be considered in the coming months. But for the most part, she's been holding steady, and that's what we're happy about. And there's not a whole lot to excessively report from the last one in June. And all her reports will be posted on the Friends of Lolita website, so friendsoflolita.org, and there'll be a link to all those reports. And so the one for July should be coming up there in the next day or so, and then we'll have that. There'll be an update from the last visit. Sometimes we'll go back and say, okay, here's, because sometimes if, the staff may know what we're talking about, but sometimes we have to remind the audience, this is what she had earlier in the year, and this is what the report now shows. So sometimes we'll refer back to earlier reports, but they should just be sequential updates from the prior report each month. Unless something happens, that we need to report, every 2 weeks or so. But for right now, the plan is to do it monthly. Currently, she lives with a Pacific white-sided dolphin. We don't know what the plans are, if there are any plans to change that living situation. We do. The interesting thing that I noted when I was there is that, and I don't know her history interacting with the other dolphins in the water, but they didn't seem to interact with each other very much. And I was expecting them to at least have some curiosity, but he would be in one side of the pool and she'd be on the other side listening to us or doing something else, some other activity. But I was surprised. So I don't know what the plan is, if they plan to keep this white-sided dolphin there with her or what they're going to do. Because obviously, if anything changes, he's been with her for so long and he at least provides some company. I don't know how much she interacts with him. You guys might know better on that part. So we are considering the lag, and keeping that in our field of vision as things move forward, because we don't want to forget about the lag that's in there right now. Sorry, I say lag. It's Pacific white-sided dolphin that was part of this genus name.
Thank you for telling us that and giving us kind of the overview of what you're doing. We're so happy and blessed that it's you and Jim doing this, because I mean, for so long, as as everybody knows, the USDA and last year, and then her report in February of being sick, and just really asking for independent veterinarians was,
Yeah.
that was like the prayer. That's what all the activists were, for, and advocates and prayers. And so once I do want to, not that they need a shout out, but I do want to mention, like, we are very grateful for the Dolphin Company for taking ownership and being willing to not just have these conversations, but being willing to allow independent vets to come in, and we're so happy that it's you. I want, kind of one of the whole points was to bring you on here so people have an idea who is caring for her, because we all love her, and so of course we want to know who's caring for her. And I, just the fact that Howard knows you and your experience was very comforting to me. And so I'm hoping, if it's okay with you, we can talk a little bit about your, I don't know, we could start with your education experience, and I know you've been doing this for over 20 years, but school was a little further back. So do you mind to share with us your education journey?
Sure. And this is a good way to segue from Toki, because one of the reasons I was brought on is that my background with epidemiology, so people may have heard that term more during the pandemic, but essentially what I do is I study the population health. So a clinical veterinarian studies more of the day-to-day. They see the animal. It's like your doctor sees you and they're in a clinical setting. And so that's very important. That's where Jim comes in, because he has a lot of experience. I don't have a lot of killer whale experience per se, but what I do have is the ability to sort of take that big picture, incorporate, the data that's been provided to us by her clinical care team there at the aquarium, and also to look at it from the standpoint of population. What's happening with the southern residents? How can we, what's being done up here to monitor southern resident health? Can that be adapted to her situation, and sort of, take some of the studies that they've done, because it is, again, hard to study an animal. How do you study an animal that's that large, or that you never really see that much, or you see very little? It's always underwater. And so that was kind of one of the reasons to bring me on board, is to analyses of blood work, to look at big pictures, to kind of see what's happening in the research world, that, is there testing that we could apply to her that might be, especially stuff from the human world that we may, as veterinary worlds, may not know about yet, or maybe not have access to some of the tools that they use that would be less invasive, so that we don't have to have her, pulled out of the water, or, poked a million times, or, what have you, to make her life as comfortable as we can. And so my interest in the epidemiology came about as sort of a CSI for animals. I was very interested in how ocean health is impacted by human health and vice versa. So I have an interest in what we call One Health, and it's an intersection of human, animal, and environmental health, but I like it in the aquatic setting, so particularly marine ecosystems. And that's a lot of what I do here in the Pacific Northwest. Sort of my day-to-day job is looking at diseases, responding to, animals that are sick or dying or have died, and see if we can get a better understanding of what's happening with ocean health. How much is it being impacted by humans, and in what regard? And can we do things to mediate some of that, or mitigate some of the influences that we have, particularly in coastal areas? Because, Puget Sound is like a living laboratory. I mean, it's a big, breathing, dynamic system, and lots of things use this area. And, how can we better live in harmony with the animals, the people that have been here for millennia, and people that move in, new people that move in every year. And it's becoming such a busy area and very heavily populated. What can we do, and what impact are we having, and how can we slow that down, reverse it, mitigate some of that damage that we are doing as we use these resources in this area? And, it's a tough thing. It's not simple. It's not going to be easy. But I think one of the things that Toki has proven to be, and I think is kind of one of the things I found was very interesting, is they are very, very invested in her down here. And I think she's got a great story behind her. She's a great case study. I hate to say it that way, to use dry clinical terms, but if there's anyone that can provide a really great story on sort of a redemption story, I think she is the one. A story of redemption, of humans redeeming themselves, particularly more modern era man for the last 50, 60, 100 years that we've influenced things here. More than that, probably, obviously, but at least in the midterm is have her be an ambassador. But I have to say, there was one thing I was kind of interested or surprised. I really thought that when it was announced, when the first report came out, our first visit that we did, I know it made a lot of news with the killer whale community, the orcas, the people who really take an interest in her. But I was really surprised I didn't hear about it in the mainstream media here in the Northwest. I don't know how to explain that. You guys probably have a better handle of that, but I thought it would be just hitting the, I thought it would be like front page Seattle Times, or maybe not front, but important. So I don't know. I would like to see more awareness of what's being done to help her down there here on a broader scale. And I don't know how that, I think that would be very, I would like to see that. I think it would be a great thing for her and her cause and really what she represents. And especially the people that come in and recently moved into the area that may not know anything about her. And so I think it's up to us to keep her face in the news, keep her reports going and just let people know that there is still one of them out east. And, don't want to forget. And no one's not going to forget, but at least, make people aware that are new to the area that maybe don't know the story about her. But yeah, so my background is, I went to vet school and tech. I grew up in Dallas, and my first exposure to a killer whale was at Seven Seas, just west of Dallas at a park. And I don't remember the name. I can look it up, but that was my first. I have a picture of this whale. And when I was a kid, I was like, oh my gosh, most people would put up boy bands, and girls my age would put up boy band posters. And I put up Jacques Cousteau and, dolphin pictures on my walls. That's who I really liked growing up. And so I went to school at Texas A&M, knew I was going to do marine animals, wasn't sure how, but I finally made my way west and ended up working in rehabilitation centers and stranding networks in California for 10 years, and then eventually made my way north here. And so I've been involved. I've worked at NOAA as a stranding coordinator. I had Kristen Wilkinson's job before she took over after I left, and then went back to grad school a couple of times to get the training in epidemiology. But my heart is really helping, trying to see what we can do to help marine life, keep the oceans healthy as we can, and try to educate folks on how do we go about doing that, and not, people want to live and enjoy their lives, but so we want to see how we can live together and make that possible with not having as severe an impact on the ocean and the animals that live in it and the plants as we are right now. So, yeah. So that's where I am. And I do that pretty much. My day is working on strandings. And in fact, I had to go see one this morning. And then I also work on, projects that deal with crunching of data, disease data in marine mammal populations, or even marine. I do a little bit of work with corals, and that's a really problematic area for corals. So, but anyway, yeah. So any questions you guys have, I'd be happy to answer. That's sort of my life in a nutshell and what I do and how I can bring that to Toki.
Well, I could jump in and just say that I've known Stephanie for a long time. I've known her on the beach and at the necropsy table and at conferences and just many conversations, and always known Stephanie to be true blue, straight, honest talk, and whatever is happening, she explains, and in fact is so educational. People really want to work with Stephanie because she tells what she's doing and explains it in terms that you can understand when working on very complicated cases and animals that are described in long scientific terms, and she's looking for things and explains what she's looking for and how she's doing it. And it's all so informative. And so I've just appreciated working with you all these years, Stephanie. It's been fantastic. And so many others have. You're always a big hit. When Stephanie's doing a necropsy, everyone wants to join in. So it's been great to work with you all these years. And when I found out that you were one of the two who were brought in to watch over Toki and see how she's doing and give us regular reports, I was so thrilled, because that way I know I'm getting the straight scoop. I know what's going on, and you're completely forthcoming, and I really appreciate that. So that's my testimonial for Stephanie.
It's been great working with you and Susan all these years. So an example of just kind of came to my mind here. One of the projects that we've worked on is doing a risk assessment on a fungal disease called mucormycosis. And that was the one that, is it L90? Who was the one that got started?
Yeah, L95 out on the coast, right after the tagging.
So when that whale died, that really, so we'd actually isolated this fungal organism called mucormycosis, and we'd found it. Well, at first we didn't really, we kind of saw it occasionally. We're like, yeah, we'll just put that in the reports, in our necropsy reports. But when L95 died, and that was found to be in the animal at the tag site, and through the tissues, that really kind of raised an alarm. And when we went back to the records, we looked at the earliest case that we had found, and it's been primarily in harbor porpoise. And the earliest case we had in 2012. And before that, we'd had another fungal organism called Cryptococcus that was found up in Vancouver Island that's originated from there. But we haven't seen that in many years. And all of a sudden, this mucor. So from the CDOC Society, we were able to get a grant, and this was all pre-pandemic, and then it got delayed 2 years because of pandemic, but it's finally finished and about to be published. But it's basically looking at the harbor porpoise cases, because there were so many, and using them as a sentinel, sort of a canary in the coal mine. And that's what we've always used these porpoises for. Not that we don't care about the porpoises themselves, but they are great sentinels for ecosystem health within the Salish Sea, because they are living in the same areas as the killer whales, but the southern residents and what I call now the resident transients. There's so many of them. And so, we did this assessment to try to see if there were some things that might not necessarily say cause the fungal organism or the animal will be more susceptible, but that might be related to it, or put it, because normally in humans, it's associated with immune compromise. So people that are undergoing organ transplants, that have diabetes, that are going through chemotherapy, that are chronically ill or have chronic infections, those are the people that we tend to see it more. And it is a nasty organism. And interestingly, during the COVID pandemic, in India, had a really, really high surge in mucormycosis cases in COVID patients. And what they attributed to it there, because it lives in leaf litter at the bottom of forest, it's aerosolized, dispersed. We don't know how long it lives in the water, but we think what's happening is that the interface of the air, like the spores get loose in the environment, they blow in from off the land when things are moved, or there might be even it's been associated with development areas where the ground stuff is torn down, and the land is modified to put in new housing or what have you. And so when things get disturbed and they get aerosolized, because these cetaceans, these porpoises and whales, they intake air so quickly and so deeply into their lungs, it gets implanted down in their lungs, and it can spread to other tissues. But in India, these cases were associated with some storms and storms afterwards that came in and really uprooted all this. And so we had people with COVID that were immunocompromised and at high risk. And so they had these really high cases of the same fungal organism. So basically the risk assessment has showed us that one of the things also too is that is a risk factor for it in humans, at least, is high iron content in the blood. But we can't get a hold of blood during necropsies, because that blood is it has to be like serum not just whole blood that's, after postmortem. So we ended up using tissue samples, liver and kidney and other pieces of tissue that were tested for some of these heavy metals. And iron was one of them that was seen to be elevated. So it's not the end of the story. We didn't find a smoking gun. It's probably a multifactorial cause. Maybe contaminant levels or certain areas might make them more susceptible to getting this fungal organism. But it is definitely an organism that shows up in immunocompromised. So these animals, these porpoises at least, are immunocompromised in some way. We don't have a large number of them, but we have some. And fungal organisms have always been a thing that the clinicians that take care of animals in parks and aquaria are always, fearful of an animal getting a hold of, is a fungal organism. And so that's one of the things that Toki is monitored for very closely. Yeast are included in that. And so, we find that doing some of these studies in the wild animals can give us hopefully some clues, or at least some better insight into, are there things that we should focus on more in some of these animals that we see. Obviously we can't get blood off of the southern residents that are free ranging. We can't get liver samples. So this is where, technology and getting, next generation type technology, maybe someday we can measure iron from some other tissue, but it's those types of studies that if we can use the porpoises to help sort of hone in on what tissue might be, or what things should we be looking at for these types of diseases that these animals might be at high risk for, that we can then use to help mitigate the disease in our endangered species in the Salish Sea. So that's kind of where all the epidemiology comes in, is looking at population health and what factors influence the occurrence of a pathogen in a population, and what factors might protect a population from a certain pathogen. And that's kind of what my job is number crunching to come up with these studies, and how can we apply those and inform the clinicians and inform some of our resource managers, hey, we got a problem here, or no, we don't. So, yeah.
Yeah.
Fascinated by that. Just fascinated.
I
love it.
The level of in-depth thinking and educational background to know what to look for and how to look for, and the investigative curiosity to be creative in the way that you're trying to find answers. So,
yeah, I'll tell you another thing that we're very concerned about in the Salish Sea, and I know that's one of the things that's being monitored very closely in Toki, is antimicrobial resistance. So, think about an animal. If you're, equate her to being, or a human, let's do a metaphor, like a human in a hospital for 50 years, and the number of, say you get air that comes in from, I don't know, or you drink water that comes in from, let's say water, you drink water that comes in from a questionable, water, what do they call it, a wastewater treatment facility. So, yeah, sure, over your lifetime, you're going to get bacterial infections. We'll treat those. But what we're seeing now, not necessarily in her, but just in general, and especially out in the environment in the Salish Sea, are bugs, pathogens, bacteria that either are carrying resistance genes in their DNA and getting passed on to either humans and or animals, or sitting in the environment. Or we're seeing the antibiotics that get put into the environment, whether it's intentionally or not. Usually it's not intentional, but it just kind of gets out with the groundwater. Or we end up seeing animals that have been treated with antibiotics, or humans that go out into the water, into the Salish Sea, and they may urinate in the water. They may have a bladder infection, may pass along E. coli. You don't necessarily have to have a bladder infection if you've got E. coli. People can pass it. And so those bacteria that are remaining in that human or dog or person have been passed into the water while they're swimming. They can then infect other humans, other marine life, or they can sit in the sediment. So that's one of the things that's very, very concerning. And there have been a couple papers out that have been put out by the University of Washington, some colleagues there that are environmental scientists, and they're looking at southern resident killer whale resistance genes. And I think one came out 2 years ago, and another one, I think another few years ago, that Stephen Rafferty did. But that's one of the things that we're concerned about. So now there's going to be hopefully a study that we're going to do with the FDA is to look at resistance in, we're going to start out with harbor seals because those are the easiest to get a hold of, but see if we can determine what the degree of resistance is on a bigger scale, and to see if we can detect a test, or they can form it, the FDA can develop a test that would be specific to harbor seals, where we can say, okay, we get a sample from them. Here are the bacteria they have. Here's what they're resistant to right away, instead of having to go and culture something. And so it would all be molecular methods. And that's what's so great about DNA, is that you don't have to sit and wait days and days for something to grow, if it'll even grow, because some things don't grow very well in a lab. So that's kind of the next project that I'm getting involved in. And so with that, because I know that's a concern with Toki, is that, if there was ever an option or someday, decisions made and she's brought back into a pen, what is she bringing back? But what is there here that could affect her? And so that's a very important topic of discussion. And the Dolphin Company is very interested in that subject and talking about that and seeing. And so that's one of the reasons we really want to know every time if she's not feeling well. That's why blood work's done so often on these animals, because we want to catch everything that could show up. They can't tell us what's wrong. It's, they don't necessarily always show they don't feel well until maybe, like cats, sometimes they don't show it till they're really, really not feeling well. And then you got to scramble to figure out what's going on. So it makes it a challenge as a veterinarian, because again, sometimes you're limited in your diagnostics. Sometimes, your patient won't tell you what's going on. They may bite you if they don't feel well. They may just curl up and not eat. So, not eating can mean a million different things. And that's part of the challenge, is trying to pinpoint. So not only testing her, blow and blood and tissues, but also testing what's around her in the environment, in her pool, what's growing around, because birds come over, they can defecate, and they can also be carrying. In the Northeast has highly pathogenic avian influenza outbreak going on. So we don't want that coming south and, having them defecate, poop in her pool, and potentially exposing her to viruses. And I'm just talking about bacteria now, but there's fungi, and then there's viruses that can. So that's really, this is something where she's watched so closely because of her age, especially. And I think, do I want to say she's the oldest killer whale?
She's about tied with Corky. Corky was captured about a year earlier.
That's right. Okay.
At an earlier age. So they're about.
Yeah. So that's, it's like anyone who's, getting up in age, we have to just be really careful and know that we're at greater risk. And so that's, we have that age component to think about too. And we have to be careful the things that she's given, because it's not the same as giving a 10-year-old something versus a 50-year-old. And I don't know what 50-year-olds killer whale, what their metabolism is like. I don't think anyone knows. So this is something that's very, I think, a learning experience for everybody involved, but also while we're also trying to just keep on tabs. And I know the latest report we've gotten is that she's doing well and she's holding steady and eating well. So, and maintaining her activity level. And I don't know, I know there's some plans to have us go back out there and do a check. We haven't quite figured out the frequency of our visits, because a lot of the information, a lot doesn't change from week to week necessarily. So as long as no news is good news, we're happy about that, while the Dolphin Company does the background deciding what they're going to do. So, we just provide information.
Is there any way to sort of in general assess her immunocompetence, her sort of ability to fight off disease in a general?
Yes. Well,
her overall metabolism?
I know that they do immune studies they've done it. I don't know if they've done it on southern residents or killer whales in general, but I know they've done them on belugas up at Mystic Aquarium. And so I know Jim has talked about that. That's something he's very interested in, is her whole immune makeup right now, especially at this age. How is it? And so he's been looking into where that could be done, because the thing with, you think, I can just, send a sample off, but every species has to be validated, and and depending on the funds and the interest of the lab, I was surprised because I thought, oh, we'll just send off, do that. Well, it's not always that simple because it's so much investment on the lab's part. Like if they're going to do a bunch of killer whale samples, many animals, then I think they're more likely. Like the belugas, they do studies on the live animals, but they're actually able to capture the animals in Alaska and then sample, and they do it in Canada too. So I know Jim's been working on that part, and I'm looking into more of looking at microbiomes. And I did mention, I know I wanted to look. I talked to Giles the other day about, what are some of the things that they're doing to monitor health in the southern residents that we could adapt to her, because I think it'd do two things. One is the less hands-on we are with her, the less, she gets stressed out of having to. I'm not saying it's a bad stress, but every time you got to like present your flukes for something, I'm sure it's not a fun activity for them. But at the same time, I thought it'd be kind of neat if there's something we can do that's comparable to what they're doing in southern residents to compare what her makeup looks like compared to what those in the wild are, and just see, like look at stress or look at, microbiomes, the organisms that live on their skin. It changes depending on how they're doing, like health-wise and stress-wise. And so that would be something neat to do. And I don't know if they're doing that. And so I just kind of put out some feelers to talk to Giles about some of the things that they're doing that we might be able to adapt. So yeah, with the summer, it's been kind of hard because people are out in the field and, people are on vacation, traveling. So I think once the summer rolls down to an end, we'll be able to move things along and have more updates on the diagnostic side of things. And I think we're going to have to get creative with her and look to the human field, because again, we're dealing with an animal that she surprisingly wasn't as, she doesn't know as many behaviors as the killer whales in SeaWorld do. As far as like, well, because they don't have a pool bottom that comes down to help them examine her. So they have to rely on her, getting, I don't know the proper terms, but putting, hopping up on the, I hate that you say that way, but she hops up on the deck, so to speak. But I know that, she'll do things like blood draw, and they can do pretty simple things, but, blow cultures. But, to do anything more than that, I think they would have to get either better equipment in there or to train her on some behaviors. And I don't know all the behaviors that she knows at this point. We were just looking at her, how her behavior was in the tank on her own without any, humans messing with her. But yeah, like I said, I was surprised. I mean, I thought she wasn't doing any of the repetitive behaviors that at least that day, the 2 days I was there, that I've seen in other animals. She seemed to really enjoy company, which was interesting. Not to anthropomorphize, but she was there listening, and she'd kind of watch us. And so she'd follow us around when we looked around the pool and kind of checked out the facility. And so she was quite interested. She obviously had never seen us and knew we were strangers there. So that was interesting. But yeah, so like I said, there'll be the new update for July coming up, and that will be the next day or so. So that'll be on the Friends of the Lolita. And right. Yeah, so I think this will be a really good. I think it'll be really good for everybody involved moving forward, keeping people, up to date. If there's not a whole lot of news, it means things haven't changed. But again, we're just kind of waiting to see what happens with the dolphin company, what they want to do, and go from there, because there are some upgrades obviously that are needed there. And do they want to spend the money to do that? I mean, that's something they'll have to decide. And if not, then what happens next? So, and luckily Jim and I are not in those discussions unless it involves, her health. I mean, obviously it does, but I mean, the mechanics of doing all those things, we don't have to, other than, don't go put drills in there and start drilling around there while she's in there, because that's going to stress her out. So
absolutely.
Yeah. Stephanie, everybody here, every week, again, this is like our gathering space, right? So everybody can chat and everybody watches and wants to hear updates. And we have a lot of, like, we had Giles on, and we've had some really cool guests on just to kind of keep people educated. And so thank you, because I think again, like she's our baby. We all love her, and we want to know who's caring for her. And you're clearly the best person for that. So thank you. I just want to say thank you from probably every single person watching. Thank you for saying yes and going in and being there for her. I feel so comforted knowing that it's you. And so I do just want to say that because I'm sure everybody feels that way after hearing your experience. I mean, you have your education, your research experience, your clinical experience, your teaching experience, peer reviews, publications. I want everyone to check out your website. Real quick, Howard, I'm going to cover your face for a second with this logo. I don't know how else to do it. But marinemed.com. If you guys go there, you can check out everything on there. There's links to all the publication, the peer review publications. And I mean, I just got lost in that today, just everything that you're involved in. And I know I do want to ask a little bit about, because I know a lot of what you do is with the strandings. And I imagine that's got to be really challenging and really heartbreaking. But I kind of want to just check in and see what's the most rewarding thing about your job?
I would say twofold. One is helping the animal, of course, first and foremost, unless it's dead, but at least it won't have died in vain. Hopefully we can gather information to help inform and save other species and other members of its species. And the other is really education. I love to see people take an interest in the ocean, anything that makes them more aware, particularly people who've just moved to the area. Not to say that people lived here all their lives or 30 years don't. I mean, they've heard the story, and some are not going to care, but I think most people do care about it here. But it's the new people that have moved to the area, and it's happening every year, every month, every week, every day. And anything we can do to help raise their awareness, their self-awareness about what part they play in ocean health and the health of the animals that live in it. So like I said, it goes back to that One Health concept. Our health is so interlinked, that of humans with the ocean, our environment, and other animals. So you can't really, and I think the pandemic really showed that you can't, deal with one sector of that triad without looking at the other two. So we're all interconnected, and I think that that's something that we're going to, start looking at more as we move forward. And it's a very big concept right now. Everybody's on the One Health bandwagon. You may hear about it. Next time you see it in a news article, you'll know what that means now. But it's really saying that we're all interconnected on this planet. There's no way about it. And I think that peoples that were here millennia ago already knew that. And I think we're just kind of figuring it out now, the modern man, so to speak.
Yeah.
Sometimes we don't do a great job about it, but I think deep down we care. It's we have so many other things that we have to feed our families and make a living. I know it's hard sometimes,
but it's so important. And looking at some of your interests, I mean, on climate change, on marine wildlife, the conservation of marine species. I mean, thank you for everything you do for that, because really, I mean, you said it, like awareness and education for those that don't know, and how do we care for our oceans. Any advice for people? What little things?
I would say that, visit some of the websites that talk about, how to have less of a footprint on the ocean, the environment in general. Visiting some of these sites, like, the Friends of the Leda, anything that relates to the environment, particularly here in Puget Sound area, the Salish Sea. How can we be better stewards and in our everyday lives? And I heard an interesting article this morning, and it reminded me of, when we mentioned climate change, is that in Africa, in one of the countries in Africa, and I can't remember which one it was, that there are more elephants now dying of climate change than there are of poaching, like way more. And I think, wow, that was pretty sobering. I was surprised to hear that, because I really thought poaching, and it's simply that, everything's changing now. These animals can't find enough food. They can't find enough, water, habitat. So that's a pretty sobering effect. And they said a lot of it, is human induced. So it's hard to change human behavior, but I think it can be done if we take little steps and just start with our own house and our own habits and how we live our own lives, and really, really try to do better and think about things, be a little more self-aware about our habits, our spending habits, our living habits, what we do, and where we put things and what we spend money on and things like that. It's not all lost. There is hope still.
Thank you. There you go. Let's leave on that note for
Good
sure. And Dr. Norman, you're just everything that you are interested in is interesting for us and everybody who watches. So at any point, if you would like to come on and talk about specifically about climate change and the effects on marine life, I mean, anytime that you're willing to share your expertise, people are watching, people are interested, and the folks for sure who are watching here, we're all care, we're all pretty much for the ocean. So, but again, everything you do, you're known by this audience for sure as Toki's vet. So thank you again.
Thank you. All right.
For being Toki's vet. I'm going to let Alejandro say a couple words as well, because I know he wants to thank you.
Yes, I want to thank Dr. Stephanie for this update. Thank you for taking care of Lolita Toki Tai. Thank you so much. Thank you.
Thank you, and thank you for all you do, everybody.
Okay.
I know it's uphill battle sometimes, but I think it was big news when they allowed a third party team to come in. So I think good changes are on the horizon for her. So I keep my fingers crossed, and we just keep hoping. So yeah,
we do keep trying to keep that, because I know we're never satisfied, right? We want her home, and we just want her home. But we do acknowledge the fight and the advocacy that's happened for so many years, and the massive changes that have happened just in this year alone since the Dolphin Company took over. Huge strides. So we're always in gratitude about that. Roberto, any final words?
No, well, it's been fascinating to learn from you, Dr. Norman, and I thank you for that last message that you shared, encouraging us to be better stewards of this planet. Because in one of the programs, Sunday programs, somebody asked, "What can I do for Lolita, where I am, maybe in another country, another state?" And it occurred to me that what we can do is to actually change our behavior and learn more about how to be better earthlings.
Yes, very good. Yep.
Yes, thank you so much.
Yep.
Howard?
Thank you, Stephanie. Thank you for everything, for Toki, for coming on Toki TV and telling us all about her and just being there when we need you.
That's great. And have a good time on the ranch.
We are.
All right. Thank you.
And I just want to remind everyone, each and every Sunday, 1 o'clock, we will see you again next week, 1 o'clock Pacific time. And remember, stay positive. Don't give up. We will bring her home. Thank you very much, Dr. Norman. Again, thank you so much for being with us. You guys, please check out the website. I'm trying to put it back up here again real quick. So much information. You will be fascinated by the publications and the links to the publications that are there. And Dr. Norman, I really hope to see you again. Thank you for being
with us. All right. Stay cool out there.